So as David said, Miriam is not able to be here, and so I am going to moderate this first panel. And I won't take very long. We really see this, we see all of our panels as a conversation, but this one especially. So it's about equity, it's about closing the achievement gap, and it's zeroing in on how do we use the data that exist in Oregon to enable us to know where to invest. And if we had time and we went around the room, a lot of people in this room have been working on doing that in different ways. We've selected 3 different projects that are designed to help target resources, investments, but when we get into the conversation, we'll be looking forward to hearing from other people that have been trying to do similar work and some of the strategies that they're using. Some thoughts I have about, at the end of the day, what I hope we will have a better sense of the data sources. Where are the data that would help us make informed decisions about where the children are? And I hope we'll have a lot more understanding of methods, because some methods give us much more accurate answers than other methods. And so hopefully from these 3 stories and then from the conversation amongst all of us, we're going to come out with a lot of information, but I'm especially focused on the data sources and methods. And because I think, and so when you are thinking about sharing, you know, what data are you using, and what methods are you using? So the key is to make sure that we take advantage of all the data that's available in order to make the best decisions. The definition of community is an important one, and I think it'll be interesting to hear, but what's emerged both from the field and from the research is that elementary school catchment areas are meaningful communities when you're talking about young children. And I think there'll be a slide that Shannon shared. From the research side, Shannon did a study that she presented here several years ago with kindergarten assessment data that showed that the variance in kindergarten assessment scores was the greatest level of variance was between elementary school catchment areas, not school districts, not counties, not the other spatial areas that they considered. It was school catchment areas. So that comes from the research side, and then I'm sure a lot of you are going to have stories to tell about why. I remember, Marion, you chose elementary school, I think, when you were created. And so have others. And so we're going to hear these pieces coming together. So I'd like to start with a lovely combination of research and practice with Brenda.
Thank you. And I will not do to you what I would like to do, which is, this is Shannon's hat and this is my hat. But so our Early Learning Hub has been fortunate from the beginning to have Dr. Shannon Lipscomb advising us, working closely with us in our community, and very invested in helping us dig into how we identify our priority populations and where there are real disparities in services and outcomes for kids and families. And so she has helped to drive this work for us and has often cautioned me that our subtitle should be what our limitations of our data are and what the disclosures that we need to make about the data that we're using, because this obviously is not an exact science, and you'll see more of that as we kind of go along, but we work with what we have to work with. So my presentation today, I'm going to tell you just a little bit in context of our Early Learning Hub and what that is, who that is. Our local data strategies highlight a few of those. Shannon does have the one slide, and we'll kind of go back and forth, Bobby and I, on that about the statewide analysis of the kindergarten assessment, and then circle back around to our next steps and how we're using the data and how we want to kind of expand this work moving forward. So I will not read you our mission, but similar to the other hubs around the state, our charge is really to look for, identify, reduce disparities among our populations of kids that are not showing up ready for school in a variety of ways. We are made up in our region of 3 counties, Crook, Deschutes, and Jefferson County, and the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. Interestingly enough, when we started our hub work, we had the disclaimer that we're mutually agreeable strategies with the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, and they have since asked that we drop that and that we name them as a full partner and as a separate entity, not within the county of Jefferson, since they actually touch 5 counties, but they as a body and their investment in figuring out within the data sets where their kids specifically have some opportunity in this work. So we see that as a real win, and we will take it. We have nearly 10,000 children identified as priority population, and that is actually proxied by DHS participation and OHP participation. That is roughly, it's 61% of our population of kids 0 to 6 years old. So if that gives you a little bit of a sense. We cover 7 school districts and 37 elementary schools. The interesting thing is for our area that those 7 school districts vary. Actually 2 of those districts have only remote, what are called frontier schools, elementary schools. That makes up their district, versus we have Ben Lapine School District, which is the 5th largest in the state. So the needs, the way data is gathered, the numbers that we see in the data look very different. The smaller schools and the smaller districts, their numbers are of such a low number that we never get down to that individual data, and they often are folded into larger areas. And so it's very hard for us to tease out what their needs might be. And diversity and needs vary across locations in a big way. So we have, with our data strategies, we are addressing this roadmap. And I will tell you just really quickly that because some of these slides are kind of small, there are handouts on the back table, and I believe we're making them available electronically as well. So as we get to those, if you can't see it on here, you likely will find it in the back of the room. And this roadmap really speaks to what hubs across the state are addressing, which is school readiness and their variety of strategies. This is very tailored to what our data is telling us in terms of our strategies beyond this. That families are healthy and supported, and through all of it is really that equity lens of getting to those populations that are most disparate from positive outcomes, and then also our work about looking at systems versus programs, which has been a mind shift for us as well. This is a depiction that was put together for us about our priority population and how it falls. In this slide, this is our 0 to 6 total population, and that is that 17,000. Of that, the 10,000 is our highest needs populations. So children from low income, you can see the variance from county to county, which is how the data comes to us. This is another example of how Warm Springs, as they step up, they say, you really can't see us in the Jefferson County numbers, and this is the way the data comes to us. But of this low-income population, you can see that there's a great variance of percentage. Mike. There's a variance. Oh, I can hear me. There is a variance in percentages across the counties, but yet, even though the highest concentration of population for low income happens within our two smaller counties, our largest county has the largest number of kids. And so that for us is always kind of pulling on that. On our children of color, which for our region are predominantly Hispanic Latino families and Native American families, 64% of Jefferson County's population falls in that category. Crook, 17%, Deschutes, 22%. And so we average 27%, but big disparities by area. So like many of the regions that have been formed, I think it's always interesting to see that for a region, when you look at a regional level at data compared to what the communities are facing, you really need to dig deeper to be able to tailor the services that need to happen for those populations. So a lot of variance. One of the other pieces about our region that many of you probably already know is we have like one urban center dropped in the middle of our very rural out to frontier counties. And so that always is a little bit of a struggle as well, and a little bit of a challenge in how you look at strategies and how you target population. So within Bend itself, there are neighborhoods that we are starting to kind of dig into how we do outreach to particular neighborhoods, as the data tells us that that's where kids are living that are in more need of access to services. So to work toward equity with this diverse population, we looked at disparities in family background, both income and education, early experiences, school readiness, and success. And our ability to do this really depends on the availability and the quality of data. One of the actual tests that we use, and this is a much bigger tool which is available back there, a spreadsheet that you can see. We used, in looking at priority areas for development of preschool opportunities, this is an example of looking by school catchment area. So this data actually, and it looks like this for the full table. This data actually was based on working toward a preschool promise grid of trying to hone down which areas would be the best to target our efforts. So these are all by elementary school, so you can see there's 37 schools on here basically. We went through and utilized the services of Dr. Kevin Cherry from PSU, and he mined data for us through the American Census survey to get to census level data that we then were able to overlay with our school catchment areas and help define where our populations of high poverty, where our children of color lived within that population, to attach that to and glean, along with some other data points, where our areas of highest need were. Now that's not an exact science, obviously, and Shannon, you will see a disclaimer on the paper document as Shannon helped us work through that, because there is no data across all of these different components that can get you down to your school catchment area. That's used exclusively by schools. Their boundaries change sometimes on an annual basis within the district. And so that data also is quickly out of date because of those data changes. But this gives you kind of a framework to take a look at how to prioritize. We included, along with the breakout of children 3 and 4 years old, we looked at 200% of the federal poverty level, again, broken out by census. And then we crosswalked that with third grade reading scores, Oak's approaches to learning, and whether they were focused priority and title school status, assigned them points and came up with a point system for folks to see across all of those indicators where our highest needs were. And on here, you will see highlighted in yellow the schools that had the highest number of points, which signified the highest need. And that helped us get to prioritizing school catchment areas in the region. Questions about that? So our family and income data, I should back up. So what that led us to do with all of that data that was mined for us, there was more than we used for this particular project, but there was a lot of interest across the region in how we captured that in a way that multiple partners could use it, that we would capture it for future work. Folks that were doing everything from Head Start assessments and writing those annual reports, they're doing their community assessments, to grant applications, how they could use that data to inform the work. And so we actually developed a document, which there are a few copies in the back, but it is an expansion of our regional health improvement plan. And it's called the Childhood Wellbeing Data Report, and it includes many of these indicators, tables, data sources that were brought together as part of this project for the variety of folks to use. And we have that available online. We are looking to update that. Components of that work were the family income and education. So we looked at the data around that and found large disparities, but that they varied a lot by county. The other challenges with the data is that the most recent data was only available from 2006 to 2010. And the reason we had to go back to that kind of time frame is also because our smaller counties ended up in a larger county cohort in their data, but Deschutes County, because of their population base, stood alone. So we had to go back to a point in time where the data was gathered in a way that we could tease out what was Crook and Jefferson data compared to, I think it's a 13 county consortium. We had a similar pattern in adult education in terms of disparities by county. One of the kind of contiguous things, however, is that in our Hispanic population, over 70% were low income across all 3 counties. So there wasn't huge variance between county to county. However, with our Native American population that runs throughout the region, we saw that Native families in Jefferson County tended to have a higher percentage of, a lower percentage on their income versus Deschutes County. And then there were disparities across the income in white non-Hispanic families reported. This is a depiction of that rates of low income among children at the 200% of the federal poverty level. If you walk through the colors from the top down, it's Oregon, then it's Deschutes County, Jefferson, and Crook County is the green below. And this shows that among the Hispanic kids at 200% of the federal poverty level, they all pool around the 70% level. In the white category, there was more low income in Jefferson and Crook than in the state, and Deschutes was even a little higher in percentages at 200% and above. And this is early experiences in some of the data that was mined for us and shared that we are using. In early experiences, we looked at child abuse rates and found that child abuse rates were 2 times higher in Crook County than anywhere else in the region. We used that to help us target resources around expanding relief nursery services that did not exist in Crook County, but did in the other 2 counties. A successful strategy, and obviously needed given the data. Homelessness, we found that Culver School District, that's within a small district within Jefferson County, actually had the highest and was among the highest in Oregon, but certainly the highest for us as a region. In terms of numbers, it was not as high a number, and they are a smaller community that could look to bring resources to bear around that issue and have reduced their homeless numbers, which is really pretty impressive. But I think if you would have asked folks around the region about where our homeless rates were prior to looking at the data, Culver never would have hit the radar at all. And then preschool enrollment, and it is the highest in Jefferson County, and we're going to look a little bit more at that. So this is a little bit about attendance in preschool by race and ethnicity. One of the interesting pieces about this is that as you look up the bars here, the bars on the left are for all 3- and 4-year-olds, and then the bar immediately to the right, as they are gathered along by county, are what the population looks like in preschool. So for us, in looking at this, it was, and I would say that the second bars that are in preschool are based on parent self-report and parent perception. And so we think that because it was termed as preschool and they were self-identifying as preschool, that it likely is referencing more formal, so Head Start, actual preschool environments, and not necessarily capturing like in-home providers that may be providing preschool services. So the numbers in this for Jefferson County do include Warm Springs if they live within Jefferson County. So this is based on county reporting. We do have a portion of the population that lives on Warm Springs that actually reports into Wasco County because the Dalles and Wasco County hits the high end of the actual tribal lands. This doesn't say anything about quality or type of care. So it could be anything from ERDC, Head Start, migrant. Every bar, the disparities in this have to do with the fact that in Deschutes County, even though we have a high population of kids identified as Hispanic, we do not have the same kind of percentage represented within preschool. So we know that that's an area that we have some work to figure out why the disparity there. And then we looked at school readiness and success. And so the kindergarten assessment, KA data, 3rd grade reading scores. We have disparities by race, ethnicity, income, and location. And we are improving in some groups and or locations, and in others not quite as much. This is an example of disparities by location for letter sounds, and this was from the 2015 data. So you can see that this is the red circle, so it shows disparities by location and districts as a total. The purple circle, shows disparities by race, ethnicity vary by district, especially for Hispanic kids. And we talked a little bit about that earlier. That percentage of low income for Hispanic is similar across Central Oregon. So we need to dig a little deeper to find out why it looks different here. The blue circles are disparities within location by race and ethnicity. So the Crook and Jefferson numbers in terms of children represented as Caucasian here, and why they are, some of them dipping way below that dotted line, which is our average. And the other one was American Indian for Jefferson County, but not showing up in Deschutes. And this is an example about the differences within districts. When I talked about Ben Lapine being the 5th largest district in the state, this shows by school catchment areas their letter sound scores from 2015. At the very bottom where it kind of almost drops off the map, that's Lapine, which is the probably most rural that we have within the Ben Lapine School District. And you'll see that this is where the neighborhoods conversation really comes to bear, because within neighborhoods it looks very different. You can cross a street, be in a different school district, and scores look very different in terms of how kids come ready to school. So digging a little bit more into that. That gives a comparison to our Central Oregon average. So even though it's a big school district, resources are deployed or happen in terms of early childhood experiences differently for different kids. Oh, I bet that this is the follow-up to the statewide analysis, that it looks similar to the state analysis. These are the trend data. And she went in and updated with our 2016 numbers so that you could see the trends that we're watching. We are hoping to really correlate the strategies and the work that we're doing to see that this isn't just incidental trends where they're rising. And so that's part of the work that we are leaning and depending on our partners at OSU to help us with. So the next steps in moving toward equity, dig deeper into longitudinal data. We are hoping for a partnership down the road, have some resource requests in to dig deeper into specific strategies within our region and set up a way to look at them over time where we don't have data, so that we will be able to look at impact. Our school catchment areas, doing more work around digging into those for a region. I have to tell you that we came into regional work set up to be county structures that evolved. And so as we look at how we prioritize things as a region, it looks very different than what used to be more the 80-10-10 split for money that came to the region based on just overall population. So the mind shift to looking at addressing disparities versus how we equally divide resources or deploy resources is a whole new game for us in some ways, and we are easing into it. Identify communities where scores are disparities are decreasing versus widening, and understand that That's the piece about really assessing whether the strategies that we're employing are what's making the difference or if there's something else going on there. And then the mind shift of alignment of strategy, alignment of resource, and our investment committee for us as a hub has been well kind of mentored along the way to really start moving their investments more toward the priority population and not necessarily all general population or again deployed by just a percentage breakout based on overall population for the region. So we're looking forward to how that looks in the coming year.
So we'll hold questions until